Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you guys a video that I haven't done in quite some time. So basically this is going to be my quarterly reading update. You can also think of it as a seasonal reading update. Basically, I'm taking this model of video from Kayla from Books and Lala. Her channel will be linked up in the cards above. Basically every 3 months she does a video where she talks about her top 5 books of the season as well as reading stats. I want to discuss TV shows and movies that I've been loving, as well as music that I've been really into in the last 3 months. So this is going to span from January to March. So without further ado, let's just get into it. I think first I want to talk about the TV, movie, music stuff, and then I'll get into my reading stats and then my top 5 books of the season. So I have been watching some amazing TV shows recently. The first one that I need to mention is The Boys. This is an Amazon Prime show. So if you have Amazon Prime, you can access this show. It's essentially a show all about superheroes, but the superheroes are not the good guys that we are led to believe that they are. So this takes place in a kind of alternate universe, but present day, where superheroes exist. And there is this group known as the Seven, which is kind of like the Justice League of superheroes. And we are following a ton of different characters. Of course, we are following all of the 7 superheroes, but we are also following these normal humans that are fighting against the superheroes because they are doing some really corrupt things, essentially. This is not a series I would recommend to everyone. It gets quite dark and graphic. This series, in my opinion, may be even worse than rated R. But yeah, this show is definitely not for the faint of heart. Things get very graphic. There's also graphic sexual content as well, some brief nudity from what I can recall. I mean, it's just, it really goes there. The entire cast is truly amazing in their roles. And I also love the balance of dark humor with scenes that are truly very serious, very dramatic, very scary, almost. And it's just very unique. There is nothing else on TV like it. There are 2 seasons out so far. I have been spacing out my enjoyment of this show. I have watched the entirety of season 1 and I am about halfway to 3/4 of the way through season 2. I'm trying to space it out as much as possible because I know that season 3 recently just started filming, so it's gonna take a long time for season 3 to come out. But yeah, also I want to quickly mention that this is based off of a comic book series called The Boys. I think that is a Marvel comic book series, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong, it could be DC, I'm not really sure. But yes, if you think you can stomach it, I wholeheartedly recommend it. All of the episodes are an hour each, so there is a lot of content to take in. And then the other TV show that I want to talk about is Schitt's Creek. I am late to the ball game with this one. I just started watching this, I want to say maybe in December, around that time. My mom and I have been watching it together because my 2 older sisters have been pushing us to watch this show. And I am glad that I waited to watch it when the series was completed though, so that I wouldn't have to wait on any future seasons. But this truly has a unique sense of humor to it. If you know nothing about this series, it's about this family. They are the Roses. There is Moira, Johnny, and then their 2 children, Alexis and David, although they're not children, they're like in their 20s at least. And they are very rich and wealthy people, but essentially someone that Johnny put his trust in screws them over and they are now out of money. And so they moved to this town called Schitt's Creek that Johnny jokingly bought. So they live in this motel in the town. And it's just such a fun show, and it's so easy to binge it because all of the episodes are like 20 minutes long. My favorite character has to be Moira because she, like myself, she's an actress and her character is endlessly entertaining and so unique. I have to commend Catherine O'Hara for this character that she created because there's truly nothing like Moira in any other TV show or movie or anything like that. So yeah, if you're someone like me who slept on this show for way too long, take this as your sign to finally watch it. Then I also want to mention a couple of movies that I really adored recently. The first one is Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. And this is a film, I think this came out like back in 2018 maybe. This is another film that it took me entirely too long to finally watch. And my goodness, is this like one of the best superhero films I've ever watched. The animation is incredible. I loved the story. It's essentially about this young guy, Miles, I think, and he becomes a Spider-Man, and we quickly find out that there are other Spider-Men-like characters in other alternate universes, basically. And then last film, but certainly not least, that I want to mention is American Son. So this is a film that Netflix put out starring Kerry Washington and Stephen Pascal. Stephen Pascal is an actor that I mainly know from Broadway, but he also does have a film career. And then Kerry Washington, of course, she's very famous from Scandal, I believe is that show, right? That's another TV show that I feel like I need to check out at some point. But this is only an hour-and-a-half movie, and it is about this interracial couple. Their teenage son gets stopped by police, and now Kerry Washington's character, his mom, is now just waiting at the police station trying to find out any news about whether her son has been arrested, what's happened to him. Like, she knows nothing and she can't really get any answers from the police officers that are at the precinct. And then we have her husband, who is white. They have a very estranged relationship. We learn pretty early on that he cheated on her at some point. He eventually shows up to the precinct. He is also part of the FBI. And so eventually his character shows up to the precinct as well, and things go on from there. So this movie is based off of a Broadway play, and you can definitely tell there is that intimate play-like vibe to this movie and to this story. I think there's only 4 characters total. And at any given time, there's usually 2 people on screen. This is one of those movies that truly sucks you in from the first couple of minutes, because it starts with Kerry Washington's character being by herself, feeling very distressed, and you are just immediately in it. You feel like you are her character. It's just, oh my goodness, the acting is award worthy. I hope that this movie has won awards, because if it hasn't, that's a crime. Like, this is a phenomenal movie. Will truly break your heart and pulverize it. Like, honestly, don't go into this thinking that it's just gonna be your like typical dramatic film. Like, there's a lot going on with this movie, especially with discussions about racial issues and things like that, and police brutality. And then I quickly wanted to mention some musical artists and albums specifically that I have been listening to nonstop. So first of all, I have to bring up Miley Cyrus. She recently came out with her most recent album, which is called Plastic Hearts in 2020. Miley Cyrus is someone that I haven't always been a huge fan of. I used to watch Hannah Montana back in the day, and I loved that show. But I don't know, I didn't always love her music. But this album is something very different from her. The best way I would describe the music in this album is that it's like 80s edgy rock. That is the perfect vibe that describes this album for sure. And literally every track is addictive and catchy and amazing. Like, you can tell that she is an incredible songwriter. That's definitely something that I haven't always known about her, but in this album you see just how amazingly talented she is. Another artist that I have to mention is Ally and AJ. Their most recent album is We Don't Stop. Yeah, We Don't Stop. You may know them from Disney Channel. Ally and AJ starred together in that movie Cowbells. Ally was in Phil of the Future. I mean, they are pretty well known at this point. And most recently, their music has this fun, poppy 80s vibe to it. Clearly, I love the sound of 80s music, right? But this album is just full of amazing tracks. There's just a vibe to them and their music that I am obsessed with. Then last but not least, I have to mention Dua Lipa and her Future Nostalgia album. This album I think also came out in 2020, but they recently came out with like a remixed album or like a deluxe edition. And Dua Lipa, like, her sound is the perfect kind of pop sound for me. I adore listening to pop music, as you can tell from the artists that I've mentioned. I actually don't really listen to classical music in my free time because that is my job, and so I don't feel attracted to that kind of music in my free time. And yeah, Dua Lipa just has that perfect poppy sound for me and my music taste. Again, literally every track track on this album is spectacular in my opinion, so catchy. I love the vibe. Again, like with music, there's just a certain vibe that I love, and all three of these artists have a vibe that I really enjoy. All right, so now we are going to get into the reading portion of this video. So first, I thought I would talk about some reading stats from the last 3 months. I'm going to be talking about the amount of books that I've read from January to March of this year. So I read 92 books total in the past 3 months, which is definitely the most I've ever read because I've been reading at least 28 to 30 books every month. That's been a consistent pace for me. And I've read 31,013 pages, which is a lot. So let me give you the breakdown of the star ratings that I've been giving these books. So I've DNF'd 3 books in the past 3 months, which is actually, that's not a lot of books. I don't DNF a lot of books in general because I've gotten better and better at deciphering my reading tastes and, you know, knowing what books I'm going to enjoy before I go into them. So yeah, that's not surprising to me that I've only DNF'd 3 books. I don't have any 1-star books because that is very, very rare that I will give a book that I finish 1 star, because usually there's a reason why I finished it. I have 3 2-star books. I have 4 3-star books. I have 41 4-star books and 42 5-star books. Clearly, I'm just having a good time and enjoying all of the books that I've been reading recently. So that makes me really happy to see that for sure. So then I kind of wanted to break down the different genres that I've been reading. So in the last 3 months, I read 14 YA contemporaries. I read 8 YA fantasy or science fiction books. This has become a new trend in my reading that I'm reading more and more adult books and less YA. I still enjoy the genre for sure. I just don't read them as often, as you can tell. I read 5 adult literary fiction novels. I read 2 adult horror novels. That's pretty typical for me. I tend to save horror novels for Halloween season. So throughout the rest of the year, I don't typically read a lot of horror. I read 5 adult science fiction books. I read 1 historical fiction. Historical fiction is a genre that, while I enjoy most of the books that I read from the genre, it's not a genre that I'm attracted to. I read 2 nonfiction books. I need to fix that. I have so many nonfiction books on this shelf that are staring at me that I need to read, and I just never do because I prefer fiction over nonfiction. It is what it is. So I read 27 historical romance novels. Oh my goodness, clearly that is my genre of the moment. I don't know, I just love the escapism of reading historical romances. I don't know, there's just something so appealing about romances that take place in a time period other than our own. I don't know how quite to explain it, but yeah, so I read a ton of historical romances. Then I read 5 fantasy romances. These are all adult novels, by the way. I read 7 paranormal romances, 11 contemporary romances, 3 dark romance novels, and 1 adult fantasy. So that is the breakdown of all the genres that I've been reading. I definitely don't plan on reading any less historical romances in the near future. It's still a genre that I have just fallen head over heels in love with and have fully gone down the rabbit hole with. I want to read more contemporary romances, and I do want to delve a little bit more into dark romance. But that is a genre that I definitely haven't read many of, and while for the most part dark romances aren't my cup of tea because there are tropes and things going on plot-wise that I usually don't want to read about, but there are some dark romances that aren't too dark that I do want to try out in the near future. So that's everything for the stats. So let's get into my top 5 favorite books of the season. I don't have a ranking of these books. I truly love them all pretty equally, so I'm just gonna go with the book that's on the top of this stack. And that is Learn My Lesson by Katie Robert. This is a book that I read just about a week ago, and it totally blew me away and took me by surprise. This is the book that I'm talking about when I say that I want to get into more dark romances now, because this book was the dark romance that I didn't even know I needed in my life. So this is book 2 in Katie Roberts' Wicked Villain series. If you don't know, the basic concept of that series is doing retellings of Disney movies that we all know and love, but putting one of the heroes or the heroines with the villain of the story. So this one is actually a throuple situation, or an MFM romance between Hades, Meg, and Hercules. I'm just gonna let you sit with that for a second, because if that premise doesn't pull you in, I don't know what will. But this also takes place in a contemporary setting, so Hades is not like the blue flame hair dude that we all know from the movie. He seems to be like in his 40s, I would say. He has like salt and pepper hair, and he wears like black frame glasses. And then Meg and Hercules, it sounds like, look pretty close to their animated movie counterparts. One of the things that Katie Robert just nailed about this book, I did talk about this a lot in my end of March wrap up, so I'm sorry if you're over me talking about this already, but I just think that Katie Robert nailed these three characters so well. And while at first it doesn't seem believable that these three people could be in a relationship together, she just makes it work. Her writing is gorgeous. I was completely mesmerized from page 1. Like, I'm just gonna read you the first couple of sentences. If this doesn't pull you in, I don't know what will. But this is from Meg's POV, and it says, "Once upon a time, a woman fell in love with a man. He wasn't a good man. Men never are, I found. But this woman hadn't learned that hard lesson yet. She still had stars in her eyes and the kind of innocent love in her heart that the world delights in setting aflame." I mean, come on! And that's just the first couple of sentences. Like, so good. This is also, I want to point out, a very kinky and dark romance series for sure. The way that Katie Robert writes sex scenes, you guys, like, chef's kiss. Incredible. Yeah. Incredible. I also read the sequel to this one, which is A Worthy Opponent, which is about Tink and Hook being together. I adored that one almost as much as this one. I cannot wait to devour the other books in this series. Next up, we have Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. This is a book that I recently read in a reading vlog that I did, where I read some of Bree's absolute favorite romances. She's from the channel In Love and Words, in case you didn't know. So I'm gonna link that reading vlog up in the cards above so that you can get more of my in-depth thoughts about this book, because I don't want to harp too much on it because I discussed it so much in that reading vlog. But this is a contemporary small town romance. We have our hero Archer. He has lost the ability to speak because he was in a very tragic and traumatic accident when he was about 7 years old. And then we have Bree, who moves to the small town that Archer is from at the very beginning of this book. She is escaping some things from her past. This almost could be described as a romantic suspense. There's definitely a lot of suspenseful moments going on in this book, but the romance between Bree and Archer is everything. Also, Archer is this sweet virgin hero. That's not a trope that you get a lot in romances, but I thought it was beautifully, beautifully done in this book. Next up, we have a YA contemporary romance that really took me by surprise. I didn't think that I would love it as much as I did, and that is Happily Ever Afters by Elise Bryant. So I have to give credit where credit is due. I was turned on to this book by Jess from Peace Love Books. She talked about this in a wrap up at some point, probably back in January or February, I want to say. And she was just raving and raving about how amazing this book was, that I knew I had to pick it up as well. And I loved it so much that I had to buy myself a physical copy. So this is about our main character, Tessa. And I would say this is a crossover between books like Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell and To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han, with Black Girl Magic. I feel like that's the perfect way to describe this book. We have Tessa. She is a writer. She ends up going to this arts high school to study writing, and early on in the book she gets a very serious case of writer's block. So her and her best friend create this scheme to get her out of her writer's block, because she primarily writes romance stories, and so her and her best friend think that if she gets real life inspiration by being in an actual relationship, that she'll be able to write again. So this is adorable. It's also very messy. There is a love triangle, and Sam, who's one of the love interests, is seriously one of the sweetest guys I've ever read about in any romance novel ever. The epitome of a cinnamon roll hero. I fell in love with him so hard, so fast. There was also some really fantastic disability representation in this, because Tessa's brother has some disabilities. I can't remember exactly what he has, but yeah, just fantastic, fantastic all around. All right, guys, we have 2 books left to talk about. So next up is The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. This is book 1 in his Extraordinary series. TJ Klune is an author that I have read 2 books from, and they are 2 of my favorite books of all time at this point. So of course this book had to be in my top 5 of the season. But this is a YA series centering around our main character, Nick. He has ADHD. He also is a fan fiction writer. He writes fan fiction about these 2 superheroes, Pyrostorm and Shadowstar. He lives in a world where superheroes do exist. And he is also queer. He has best friends that are queer. Like, this is just the gay superhero YA book of my dreams. It is incredible. It's also really funny, and I just loved the way that TJ Klune wrote the superheroes. He definitely played into the camp and the fun of superheroes, if that makes sense. And I just cannot recommend this enough. If the plot sounds at all intriguing to you, like, it's just so good. There's also a really fun love triangle going on between Nick and 2 of his good friends, although one of them is more of like a frenemy, and then the other one he's been best friends with his entire life. And last but certainly not least, this is going to be no surprise to any of you, that is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. I did do an entire reading vlog about my experience reading this book and A Court of Frost and Starlight if you're interested. There are no spoilers in that vlog, so definitely don't worry if you haven't read this book yet, but this is book 4 in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. I'm sure you all know about Sarah J. Maas and her Agatar series at this point, but this is from the POV of Nesta and Cassian. It's their truly epic fantasy romance. Yeah, definitely go check out that reading vlog if you want to hear more of my in-depth discussions about the characters and about the very general plot that's introduced at the beginning of the book. Like, it's nothing that's going to spoil your reading experience, I promise. But this is a stunning book about the romance between Nesta and Cassian, but also about healing from trauma, because Nesta is dealing with a lot. And yeah, it's stunning. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this quarterly or seasonal update. I hope that you enjoyed. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to tell me about your top favorite books that you read in the past few months. And with that being said, I would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe. And I thank you in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!